Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Yashodanandana Vrajayanaranja Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Rama Rama Kunja Vihari ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिविकासस्वामिनिति नामिने नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशधाकल्पद्रुव्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव वेदानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Today is the disappearance day of Srila Abhiram Das Thakur. Srila Abhiram Thakur. So we will read something about him. So Abhiram Thakur was one of the Gopas in Krishna Leela, one of the 12 Gopalas. So yeah, in Sakyaras he was one of the prime Gopalas, one of the prime Gopas, Gopsakhas of Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram. In fact, it is described that he was a close associate of Lord Balaram, and his name was Sridama. The famous Gopala Sridama. So he appeared as Srila Abhiram Thakur in Gaur Leela. So it is also mentioned that he is a favorite of Nityananda Prabhu. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, when describing the expansions of Lord Balarama in the 11th chapter of Adi Leela, so basically we see that here expansions also refers to the branches, means the followers or descendants of Sri Nityananda Prabhu. So here it is described. One more thing is that Abhiram Thakur was also known as Sri Ramadasa, just Ramadasa, or Abhirama also. Ramadasa, Bhiramadasa, like that. So in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami writes about him. In the 11th chapter, 13th verse, it is described. Shri Ramadasa Ara Gadadhara Dasa Chaitanya Gosaira Bhakta Rahitandra Pasha. So this chapter is describing about expansions of Lord Nityananda. So two devotees of Lord Chaitanya named Sri Ramadasa and Gadadhar Das always lived with Sri Veerabhadra Gosai. So we'll read about Veerabhadra Gosai also eventually, and we'll read this purport also. So he was a very powerful devotee. We can understand that he's not an ordinary personality. Of course, all associates of Lord Chaitanya are very powerful. As Devkinandan Das Thakur says, Brahmanda Tari Shakti. They all have the power to deliver the entire universe. So all associates of Lord Chaitanya are very powerful. But however, distinctly in the case of Sri Abhiram Das Thakur, we see it is described that so he was very powerful in criticizing the atheists. So atheists would always flee off in fear whenever he was approaching, whenever he was arriving. So here there is some description of his Leela, how he appeared in Gaura Leela. So it is described that one day Lord Krishna, Balram and all the coward boys, they were playing hide and seek in the forest. And suddenly Lord Krishna decided to go to Navadvipa. So everyone left, Krishna, Balram and all the other associates, they all left for Nadia. But Sri Rama was hiding in a cave during that time, and so he somehow couldn't come to know that they all have gone there. So upon reaching Navadvip and performing their pastime, suddenly Lord Gaur Sundara, he realizes that Sri Rama is missing, and he is very much sorrowful and disappointed, and he needs Sri Rama now, and he addresses or he dispatches Lord Nityananda to find about his whereabouts. Where is he? So Nityananda Prabhu goes in search of him, and he reaches Vrindavana, and he approaches. He finds out that cave, and he calls for Sri Rama. And Sri Rama doesn't recognize Nityananda Prabhu because he is in a different in the dress of Nityananda Prabhu. Another thing that is described is that the size of the bodies, so they were measurements of the body, so they were quite different in Kali Yuga as compared to, they are quite different in Kali Yuga as they were in Dwapar Yuga. So it is mentioned that Kali Yuga, the size of the bodies, measurement of the body is 3.5 hands, and in Dwapar Yuga it was 7 hands, double. So considerably Nityananda Prabhu or Lord Balram in front of Sri Rama had appeared in a very small stature. So he couldn't recognize him, and when Nityananda Prabhu assured him that he is the same Balram, so Sri Rama could not accept it. But he devised an intelligent means. So he asked him that how, if you can catch me, I'll run fast and let's see if you can catch me. He knows that Nityananda Prabhu or Balram can catch him anyhow. So there are two different descriptions of the story. Anyways, we will discuss. So as soon as Sri Rama starts running, so Nityananda Prabhu catches him, and then he accepts that he is none other than Lord Balram. In another place it is described that Sri Rama goes on running and he circumambulates the Govardhana hill for 4 times. And Nityananda Prabhu is following him. He is still running behind him. So despite circumambulating the Govardhana hill 4 times, he sees that still Nityananda Prabhu or Lord Balram is behind him. So that is an assurance for him that if he is able to still run Govardhana hill 4 times, he is certainly none other than Lord Balram. So like that, 2 descriptions are there. Nonetheless, in both the cases he accepts that Lord Balram has appeared. And Again, there are two different descriptions. In one place, he says that he is little dejected that they all left him and went to Nadia, to Maya, to Gauda Desha. Uh, so he doesn't want to come like that. He is little disappointed and little resentful, remorseful, and he doesn't want to come. And Nityanand Prabhu tries to coax him and convince him. But he was adamant. But finally he accepts, finally he allows one of his expansions. He sends one of his expansions as Ramadasa. But Sri Rama still wants to remain back in Vrindavan, in Raja, because he was greatly hurt. And it is described that because of this, Ramadasa's personality was also a little bit, he would get angered, prone to anger like that. In another place, it is described that after being convinced that so Nityanand Prabhu is Lord Balram, means Lord Balram himself has come to take him from Raja. So he says that he doesn't want to go to Nabadvip or Nadia because he doesn't want to take birth in a womb again, go to a womb again. So like that, there are two different descriptions, but again he finally somehow agrees to appear in Nabadvipa. So it is also described that if he would offer obeisances to anybody other than any other stone than a Shaligram Shila, then that stone would immediately break into pieces. So there is another interesting pastime that when Nityanand Prabhu's first child was born, now again he was close to Lord Balram in Raja Leela, and now he is a close associate of Nityanand Prabhu. So when Nityanand Prabhu's first child was born, so he went to visit him, and he offered obeisances to the child and immediately the child passed away, child died. So like that, this kept on happening. Every time a child would be born to Nityanand Prabhu, Abhiram Thakur would go and again the child would die. Like that, so many of his children died. So finally, another time, a daughter was born by the name Ganga Devi. Means Nityanand Prabhu gave birth to a daughter this time, who's with Vasudha Devi. Vasudha Devi was his wife, Nityanand Prabhu's wife. So when Abhiram Thakur paid obeisances, so the baby was unaffected. So he exclaimed that this time we have not been deceived, and he composes 100 verse in the praise of Ganga Devi. Then later another son is born to Nityanand Prabhu. So this time again Abhiram Thakur goes and pays obeisances, and this time again the son doesn't die, the child doesn't die. So this child was the famous Veer Chandra Prabhu, Veer Chandra Gosai. So again on this incident, Abhiram Thakur, he composes a stotra, Veerbhadrashtakam, in glorification of Veer Chandra Gosai or Veerabhadra Gosai, like that. So here in Chaitanya Charitamrita also, that shloka which we read, 13th verse. So we can read the previous verses also, which describes about Veerabhadra Gosai. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami initially says that there are an unlimited number of branches of Lord Nityanand Prabhu. Who can count them? Nonetheless, for my purification, my personal purification, I will enumerate the prominent ones. And he starts with Shri Veerabhadra Gosai Skanda Mahashakha Tanra Upa Shakha Jata Asankyatara Lekha. After Nityananda Prabhu, the greatest branch is Veerabhadra Gosai, who also has innumerable branches and sub-branches. It is not possible to describe them all. So, in the purport, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhashya that Veerabhadra Gosai was the direct son of Srila Nityanand Prabhu and a disciple of Janava Devi. His real mother was Vasudha. In the Gaura Ganodesha Deepika, he is mentioned as an incarnation of Kshirodakshayi Vishnu. Therefore, Veerabhadra Gosai is non-different from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we see that Abhiram Das Thakura would only pay obeisances to Shaligram, means only Vishnu, Lord Vishnu. So this time he had paid obeisances to Veerabhadra Gosai, who is none other than Kshirodakshayi Vishnu. And this is confirmed by Kavi Karnapur also in his Gaura Ganodesh Deepika. So then his descendants are described later in the Anubhashya and their place of residence. Then later it is described. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami continues, Ishvara Haya Kahaya Mahabhagavata Veda Dharma Tita Haya Veda Dharme Rata. Although Veerabhadra Gosai was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he presented himself as a great devotee. And although the Supreme Godhead is transcendental to all Vedic injunctions, he strictly followed the Vedic rituals. So then further he writes that how Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami writes that it is by the mercy of Veerabhadra Gosai that people all over the world have the chance to recite the names, to chant the names of Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda. I therefore take shelter of the lotus feet of Veerabhadra Gosai, so that by his mercy I will be able to write, so that my great desire to write Chaitanya Charitamrita will be properly guided. So like that we see that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami seeks blessings from Veerabhadra Gosai also. And we know that famous incident where Lord Nityananda Prabhu himself appeared in the dream of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami and personally instructed him to write Chaitanya Charitamrita. So which he humbly describes towards the end of Adi Leela, that incident. So again, he's in the perfect parampara, he is taking shelter of Veerabhadra Gosai also. And then it is described about Abhiram Thakur here in Chaitanya Charitamrita, that verse which we read in the beginning. So Sri Ramadasa or Gadadhara Dasa Chaitanya Gosaira Bhakta Rahe Tanra Pasa. So these two devotees, Ramadas is Abhiram Thakur, who is, and Gadadhar Das, so they always lived with Veerabhadra Gosai, like that. So we'll read this purport. So here Sri Ramadasa, later known as Abhiram Thakur, was one of the 12 Gopalas or cowherd boyfriends of Sri Nityananda Prabhu. The Gaura Ganodesh Deepika 126 states that Sri Ramadasa was formerly Sri Dama. In the Bhakti Ratnakara 4th wave, there is a description of Srila Abhiram Thakura. By the order of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, Abhiram Thakur became a great acharya and preacher of the Chaitanya cult of devotional service. He was a very influential personality and non-devotees were very much afraid of him. Empowered by Sri Nityananda Prabhu, he was always in ecstasy and extremely kind to all fallen souls. It is said that if he offered obeisances to any stone other than a Shalagram Shila, it would immediately fracture. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhashya, 10 miles southwest of the Champadanga railway station on the narrow gauge railway line from Howrah in Calcutta to Amta, a village in the Hooghly district, is a small town named Khanakula Krishna Nagara, where the temple in which Abhiram Thakur worshipped is situated. During the rainy season, when this area is inundated with water, people must go there by another line, which is now called the Southeastern Railway. So this Khanakula Krishna Nagar is the place where he is. We understand that Abhiram Thakur is present, and there is a deity of Gopinathji there. It is a temple which is still worshipped by his descendants. So there is a temple, and it is described that about this Gopinath deity also there is description that when he was Gopinathji appeared in his dream, in Abhiram Thakur's dream, and described him that where he is situated. So he goes and digs that place dug Abhiram Thakur, and Gopinath ji appears from there. So this very Gopinath ji is worshipped in this Khanakul Krishna Nagar temple. So this Krishna Nagar is not that Krishna Nagar of Navadvipa or Nadia district. This is Khanakula Krishna Nagar, which is in Hooghly district. So there is this place, Khanakul Krishna Nagar. Actually, here it is described. Bhakti Sansari Thakur writes that uh, Kula means the bank of the river, and Khana means Dwarakeshwara river. So because this town is situated on the bank of this Dwarakeshwara river, so therefore this town has got the name Khanakula Krishna Nagar. So like that. So there Abhiram Thakur, he established the worship of Gopinath ji, and still that temple is there, and it is described that it is the Shripad, or where his place of presence, and there is still a temple there, and it is visited by devotees. And it is also described that the place where he dug and excavated the deity of Gopinath ji, so there it became a lake eventually later, and that place was later known as Ramakunda. And the water which is contained in that lake is as sweet as nectar, and whoever bathes in that or drank the water, so he also became uh, he also came into ecstasy, and he also achieved the love of God, and we understand like that. And hearing of the pastimes of Gopinath ji at that time, so lots of incessant flow of people came there, and to take the darshan of Gopinath ji and take a bath in the waters of that Ramakunda, like that. So it is also described that in the rapture or in the remembrance of Sri Krishna, Abhiram Thakur, means in his ordinary, means in his bhava or in his constitutional state. So one day he remembered the pastimes of Lord Krishna, and he desired to play a flute. And he searched around and he could not find any flute. So what he did is he took a huge tree, and taking its main trunk only, so he made a flute out of it. We can understand that this is a glorious, this is extraordinary. So he was able to, and it is described in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Shola Sangera Kashta Jai Tuli Kaila Vamshi. So Ramadasa, one of the chief branches, was full of fraternal love of Godhead. Ramadasa Mukhya Shakha Sakhya Prema Rashi Shola Sangera Kashta Jai Tuli Kaila Vamshi. So he was full of fraternal love of Godhead. We understand he was in Sakyarasa, and he made a flute from a stick with 16 knots. So this is not an ordinary stick. It is described as taken a large tree trunk which even 16 men could not lift. So he made a flute out of it. And it is also described that he also had a celebrated whip with the name, and the name of that whip was Jaya Mangala. So he's a Gopa, and he has a whip to control his. So his celebrated whip was named Jaya Mangala, and it is described that whoever he touched with this whip, immediately the love of God was awakened in that person. And one famous personality, one famous Acharya whose love of Godhead was awakened was Srinivas Acharya. So when Srinivas Acharya met Abhiram Thakur, so it is described that Abhiram Thakur touched him with his whip 3 times. And Abhiram Thakur's wife Malini Devi, so she exclaimed that don't beat him more, he's just a boy. So nonetheless, his love of Godhead had awakened by the time. So like that, we see that he performed uncommon pastimes. Describing his place in Khanakula, so Bhakti Sansari Thakur further writes, so uh, when this place gets flooded with rainy season, so the area gets inundated with water and people must go there by another route. And he describes the route through Kola Ghat, from where one has to go by a steamer to Rani Chaka. And then 7.5 miles north of Rani Chaka is this town of Khanakula, which we discussed. So then he describes that how that name Khanakula came. We discussed that. And outside the temple is a Bakula tree. This place is known as Siddha Bakula Kunja. It is said that when Abhiram Thakur came there, he sat down under this tree. In Khanakula, Krishnanagar, there is a big fair held every year in the month of Chaitra on the Krishna Saptami, the 7th day of the dark moon. It happens to be today only. So today there is supposed to be a fair organized, at least in the times of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur it was current. So many hundreds and thousands of people gather for this festival. The temple where Abhiram Thakur worshipped has a very old history. The deity in the temple is known as Gopinatha. There are many Sevaita families living near the temple. It is said that Abhiram Thakur had a whip, and whoever he touched with it would immediately become an elevated devotee of Krishna. Among his many disciples, Sriman Srinivas Acharya was the most famous and the most dear, but it is doubtful whether he was his initiated disciple. So, yeah, Srinivas Acharya, we may not have been initiated by him, but he was certainly one of his disciples. And we know that Lord Gaur Sundara, Lord Chaitanya, so he ordered Nityanand Prabhu to preach in Bengal, in Gauda Desha. So there is that incident that every year this devotees from Gauda Desha used to come and visit the Lord in Puri. And they used to stay back for almost the entire Chaturmasya season and then go back to their Gauda Desha. Then 1 year Lord goes to Vrindavana. That year they are told not to come, and then again they continue. They start coming. Of course, that time Lord Chaitanya, he goes to Vrindavana, but he doesn't reach Vrindavana, if I am correctly remembering. He comes back from that Kanai Natashala after meeting or after initiating Rupa and Sanatan Goswami. So from Ramakeli he comes back. So this time he has met the devotees in Gauda Desha, so therefore he advises them not to come for Ratha Yatra. Then again next year onwards they again continue. They again resume their practice. And this time Lord Chaitanya instructs Nityanand Prabhu not to come to Puri. He should instead stay in Gauda Desha, and he should preach and deliver the residents of Gauda Desha. So therefore Nityanand Prabhu later he doesn't come and he continues preaching in Bengal. So when Nityanand Prabhu was instructed, then he sent Ramadas or Abhiram Thakur, who was one of his most prominent associate or descendant, and Sri Gadadhar Das and others. Of course, this Gadadhar Das is not our Gadadhar Pandit, he is different. So it is also described that, as we discussed, the atheists trembled in fear at the sight of Abhiram Thakur. He was a learned scholar of scriptures, and according to the desire of Nityanand Prabhu, he married Malini Devi. And his disappearance is on the 7th day of the dark fortnight of the month of Chaitra, which is today. And it is described that his descendants are still living in the districts of Hooghly and Bankura, at Krishnanagar, Amta, Vishnupur and Kotalpur. These are various places in the Gauda Desha. So his descendants of his disciples are still there. So like that we understand about Abhiram Das Thakur. So yeah, this is about some information about Abhiram Thakur. We can sing Jiani Lo. If unless we want to add something.
Srinivasacharya read out is expressed, right? In that purport, right?
Yes.
Srinivasacharya was initiated by Gopal Bhatt Goswami. Shyamananda Prabhu was Radha Chaitanya disciple. Narottam was Loknath Goswami's disciple. And Srinivas was Gopal Bhatt. There is some other version, of course. This one is coming from, I think, Saraswati Thakur. Whether it is a, let us see, Bhakti Ratnakara. There are a lot of descriptions about all this kind of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates. That he would offer obeisances, and that person, if he has any material desires, if he is not a pure devotee, then he would immediately die. That version I had heard. And about deities, if they are not personally present, they are not receiving the service. God is not personally present in the deity and receiving the service. That means basically those who are doing service, they are not proper. So the deity will break down as soon as we offer service. Break down into pieces. That is one version. We have to see authentic it is. That Raghunandan Thakur also. He came and
Yeah, that is I didn't.
offered obeisances. His father or uncle, they hit him. Understand?
Yeah. That was I didn't read that somehow.
Understanding that, oh, he is coming or he may die. Why to take risk? Then it happened with Veerabhadra also.
Yeah, that is described that Nityanand Prabhu forbade to cross the river. Even the boatman was instructed that if Abhiram Thakur comes, don't bring him this side. But still somehow or other he makes a scheme and he comes here and then he finishes all the prasadam, whatever was cooked. Anyways, again it is by his divine potency, it is double of it is again made ready, becomes ready on, and then later he meets Veerachandra, Gosai also, and in one place it was described that.
Jai Mangal good, no? What is the need of doing so much sadhana, service? With the DPs that is important. Get on beat and beaten. Completely become pure devotee. So, go into that also. Chanting technique. Chalo, ठीक. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram. Abhiram Thakur ki.
Yeah.
Abhiram Thakur ki.
Yeah.
Those jatras, if they are not, they can be revived using political support. Of course, politicians, they will not do that. Politicians means
Jatras, which one is that?
suspension should be revived. Bengal demolition.
Some of the holy places which are present in Bangladesh may get lost now.
Lost by.
Go and conquer all blackness. Some conquer. Kill them just. Forget about them. Save first. Holy places. Right. Once I can check the story, said, Guru Maharaj